It's time now for our Muni moment and a closer look at the battle between Texas and Wall Street. Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton aiming to put a check on which big banks win business from the state and its municipalities. Decisions that are going to be made based on his perception of whether those big banks are playing politics with their money. Bloomberg's Danielle Moran joining us for a little bit more. And Danielle, let's actually go back to the end of last month, the end of October here, when Texas had that big, Municipal Advisory Council meeting, which I doubt anyone outside of Texas ever paid attention to until this year.
Except Danielle.
Except Danielle, right. But this was a big deal because he really did articulate Texas's position on these issues. And this seems to be based on his own perception and the perception of some of his allies that some of these banks are making decisions with their money on some of these hot button political issues like gun control and climate change.
That's right. Ken Paxton has been sort of at the center of this debate of whether or not Wall Street has these policies that might restrict them from doing business in Texas. So he has launched a new investigation into about 10 financial companies who are members of the Net Zero Banking Alliance. And what he's trying to determine is whether or not being a member of that group seeking to cut greenhouse gas emissions is essentially boycotting fossil fuels, because Texas has this law that says if you are a fossil fuel boycotter, energy boycotter, you're unable to get public contracts, and that relates to the muni bond underwriting business.
Well, that's where I wanted to go, because you peel back the layers of pretty much anything and it becomes a muni bond story, but how exactly is this a muni bond story?
I'm glad you said that, Katie, because we think the exact same thing in our group. And this is really directly related to munis, because if you can't participate in this market, then you wouldn't be able to underwrite these bonds. And the bonds fund everything in Texas. From its booming infrastructure, you have schools, you have roads, infrastructure, airports, all of it is related to the financing. And so Ken Paxton oversees the muni bond market in Texas. He has the authority to say whether or not a bond deal can close, and so he is really at the center of this.
He's certainly center, and I mean, we're going to try to put aside politics because we know a lot of what's come out of his mouth has just been really just nonsense, to put it plain and simple. But it gets to the broader issue here, that he is also supposed to be a steward for the finances of the state here. That you had a chance to sit down and interview him. The decisions he's making, does he in any way feel that it could impact the amount of money that Texas has to pay for additional issues going forward?
He said that this is his job. He was given the direction by the legislature to enforce the laws that they put in place. So it's his jurisdiction to be able to decide how these banks' policies might be inapproved.
I'm sorry, I just want to reframe the question, because I'm not asking about the policies. I'm asking about interest costs and whether the decisions that he's making on policy are going to lead to them having to pay higher interest rates. Did he address that?
Right. I mean, he sort of addressed it. He said that there are a lot of banks that want to do business in Texas, and some of them can step in and fill the void that some of these other banks might have left, and there probably won't be a cost to that. I think whether or not that is true remains to be seen, and it really depends on the scale and in which he's willing to go. If you ban one bank, it has a smaller impact than if you ban 10.